can still smell the damp earth, even now, an almost tactile memory that clings to the back of my throat. That, and something else, something cloyingly sweet and funereal, like decaying gardenias left too long on a forgotten grave. That was the perfume of the Oglethorpe Catacombs, beneath Savannah. After my history PhD aspirations had crumbled into academic dust and student loan debt, the part-time night tour guide job was less a career choice and more an act of quiet desperation, a way to keep the wolves from the door while I tried to excavate some meaning from a life that felt as buried and lightless as the tunnels themselves. Mrs. Dana Wolf, the site manager, a woman whose smile lines seemed permanently etched with anxiety, and whose eyes never quite landed on mine for more than a fleeting second, had handed me a well-worn, laminated card. Just a few local considerations for after-hours personnel. Mr. Colson, she'd said, her voice a strained whisper that barely disturbed the thick, tomb-like silence of her cramped office. She'd warned me, with a nervous cough, about the sensitivities of certain sealed-off sections, particularly the old slave burial crypts and the unmarked children's plots from the fever years. Her predecessor, a young man named Mark Patel, she'd mentioned with a shudder, had just stopped showing up one morning. All they found was his company flashlight, still on, lying beside a single, antique porcelain doll with vacant, staring eyes, deep in a rarely used utility tunnel. The catacombs themselves were a disorienting warren, a claustrophobic maze carved from the earth beneath the historic streets of Savannah. The air was heavy, humid, tasting of lime dust, ancient decay, and that ever-present, sickly sweet floral scent. The silence was profound, a living entity broken only by the incessant drip of water from unseen fissures, and the occasional unsettling scuttle of something small and unseen in the deeper darkness. The tunnels were narrow, the ceilings low, forcing even me, a man of average height, to stoop in places. They twisted and turned with no discernible logic, a labyrinth designed to hold its secrets close. Dana Wolfe had walked me through the standard tour route with the weary air of someone reciting a script they knew by heart, but no longer believed. She'd pointed out the reinforced archways, the crumbling sarcophagi, the niches carved into the earthen walls where the city's less fortunate had once been interred. Then, back in the relative brightness of the small above-ground ticket office, she'd pressed the laminated card into my hand. Oglethorpe Catacombs. Night Staff Protocols 1. Never turn your back for an extended period on the sealed slave burial section. Tunnel C7. The spirits there harbor a rightful anger and are said to possess a long and unforgiving memory for those who profited from their suffering or disrespect their final rest. If you observe children's toys, marbles, dolls, small wooden animals appearing to roll or move towards you from unmarked graves or unlit alcoves, leave them where they stop. Do not touch them. Do not acknowledge them beyond noting their position for the morning report. 3. Should you witness the spectral forms of children engaging members of your living tour group in play, particularly teaching them games or songs popular during the 1876 yellow fever epidemic, e.g. Ring Around the Rosie, Ashes, Ashes, London Bridge, you have inadvertently become the eternal Playmate coordinator. Your shift will be considered permanent. I'd read the third rule with a hollow laugh, the kind you make when confronted with some absurd it borders on the offensive. An eternal Playmate coordinator. Grim folklore, I'd concluded, designed to spook the new guy, or perhaps a darkly poetic way of describing the psychological toll of working alone in such a profoundly sorrowful place. My failed academic career had been built on facts, on verifiable history, not on ghost stories and laminated warnings. My first few nights were uneventful, a monotonous routine of leading small groups of apathetic tourists or ghost hunting enthusiasts through the dimly lit, pre-approved sections, reciting a sanitized, board-approved history of Savannah's buried past. Then, the tours would end. The last echoes of their nervous laughter would fade, and I'd be left alone to lock up, the silence descending like a physical weight. It was then that the catacombs seemed to awaken. Cold spots would bloom in previously warm tunnels. I'd hear whispers, soft and sibilant, just at the edge of my hearing, like dry leaves skittering over stone, or sometimes like the hushed, aggrieved murmurings of a crowd. Several times, I was certain I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck when I knew I was alone. One night, after the last tour group had departed, as I was making my final sweep before locking the heavy iron gate at the entrance, I saw it, lying near an unmarked, child-sized niche in a far, seldom-used tunnel. A niche I was sure had been empty earlier was a single, perfectly preserved antique glass marble. It glinted a deep sapphire blue in the beam of my flashlight, looking impossibly clean amidst the dust and decay. It hadn't rolled there. It hadn't rolled there. It had been placed. The solitary glass marble became a small, unsettling fixture in my nightly routine. I never touched it, remembering the second rule, but its presence was a constant, silent question. The feeling of being watched intensified, particularly when I was alone in the deeper, less traveled sections of the catacombs. It wasn't a hostile feeling, not yet, but rather one of intense, childlike curiosity, mixed with something else. Something old and sorrowful. Rule 1 asserted itself with a chilling subtlety. Tunnel C7, the sealed entrance to the slave burial section, was marked on my route map with a stern, red-inked no entry, structurally unsound. It was a crudely bricked-up fork in a larger passage. The mortar crumbling, a faint, earthy, metallic scent, like old blood and rust, seeping from between the ill-fitting bricks. During one tour, as I was recounting a sanitized version of colonial Savannah's history, I had to pass directly before it. As I did, my back momentarily to the sealed entrance. An intense, almost unbearable wave of cold washed over me. A profound, suffocating sorrow mixed with a palpable, icy anger. It felt like 1,000 unseen eyes were boring into my spine. My flashlight flickered violently, then dimmed to a sickly orange. A young woman in my tour group gasped, clutching her head, complaining of a sudden, splitting headache and a wave of inexplicable nausea. The feeling and the flashlight malfunction ceased the moment I moved on, facing away from the bricked-up passage. It was during this period that I first met Veronica Ames. She introduced herself one afternoon as I was prepping for my evening shift. She was young, perhaps mid-20s, with an easy smile, bright, intelligent eyes, and an almost infectious passion for Savannah's history. She was a local historian, she explained, specializing in the city's antebellum period and its funerary practices. And the Oglethorpe catacombs were a site of particular fascination for her. She was charming, articulate, and seemed genuinely thrilled to find someone else, me, who had an academic interest in the city's buried past. She often stayed late, with permission from Donna Wolfe, she assured me, to conduct private research in the quieter, less accessible sections. One evening, as I was alone in the labyrinthine tunnels, checking the emergency lanterns before my first tour, it happened. I was in a narrow passage flanked by unmarked, child-sized burial niches. From the deep shadow of one of these niches, a small painted wooden ball, clearly very old. Its colors faded, but its surface surprisingly intact, rolled slowly, deliberately, out onto the dusty earthen floor. It came to a perfect stop directly at the toe of my boot. The air around it turned instantly, bitingly cold. Rule 2, leave them where they stop. Do not touch them. My historian's curiosity, the part of me that had once thrilled at unearthing forgotten details, screamed at me to pick it up, to examine it, but the memory of Patel's flashlight, the vacant-eyed doll, and Dana Wolfe's strained, fearful evasiveness when I'd asked about him, held me back. I swallowed hard, took a step back, and continued my rounds. The image of that small, solitary ball burning in my mind. For the rest of the night, I felt unseen eyes, small and inquisitive, following my every move. When I next saw Dana, I pressed her again about Mark Petal. Her usual anxiety deepened into something closer to outright fear. Mark got too interested in the old stories, Mr. Colson. She'd stammered, avoiding my gaze. The unmarked areas, the children's plots. He said he heard them. The whispers, the games. He started leaving little offerings. Her voice dropped. It's best not to get too involved with the local folklore here. It's not healthy. Her words were a clear warning, but also a chilling confirmation. Later that same week, I was in the small cramped staff room that doubled as a break area, looking for some spare batteries. From the main tunnel leading towards the sealed entrance of C7, the slave burial section, I heard it. Faint, distorted, almost swallowed by the oppressive silence, but unmistakable. A low, mournful, spiritual-like melody, and woven within it, a voice. A man's voice, humming, then forming broken, indistinct words filled with an ancient, unbearable pain. It sounded chillingly, like the vaguely remembered baritone of Mark Petal, a voice I only knew from a faded staff photograph pinned to the bulletin board. A voice now seemingly trapped, echoing from behind those unforgiving bricks. Mark Petal's disembodied, mournful song from behind the bricks of Tunnel C7 became another layer in the Catacombs tapestry of dread. But I started avoiding that section entirely, even if it meant taking longer, more circuitous routes during my solitary lockup sweeps. The presence of the hollow children, as I'd begun to think of them, grew bolder, more insistent. During a small late evening tour with the newlywed couple from Ohio, Trina and Kyle Jefferson, all wide-eyed wonder and nervous excitement, it happened more overtly. We were in a section detailing the city's numerous 19th century epidemics when Trina gasped. Sitting on a low, crumbling sarcophagus that I was certain had been bare stone moments before was a small antique porcelain doll. It was dressed in a faded, lace-trimmed frock, its painted smile chipped, one of its glossy blue eyes missing, leaving a dark, vacant socket that seemed to absorb the lamplight. "Oh, look, Kyle," Trina whispered, a mixture of fascination and unease in her voice. "How quaint and a little creepy." She reached out a tentative finger to touch its delicate china hand. "Ma'am, please," I interjected, perhaps a little too sharply. For preservation purposes, we asked that visitors refrain from touching any artifacts. My heart was hammering. Rule 2. The doll hadn't rolled. It had simply appeared. The air around it was ice cold. Kyle pulled Trina's hand back, looking apologetic. For the rest of that section of the tour, I felt a distinct childish pique, a cold wave of disappointment emanating from the direction of the doll. Veronica Amis became a more frequent presence, her enthusiasm for the catacombs seemingly boundless. She'd often, coincidentally, arrive just as my last tour was finishing, eager to share some new historical insight, or to ask my opinion on a recent discovery. These discoveries were always small, easily overlooked items. A corroded tin soldier half buried in the dust near an unmarked child's grave. A child's tarnished silver locket found tucked into a crevice in a wall. A set of antique bone dice. They were always plausibly deniable as long-lost items, yet their placement felt curated, staged. Veronica spoke with a gentle, almost reverent sorrow about the children lost to the yellow fever epidemic of 1876. Her eyes shining with an emotion that seemed too profound, too personal for a detached historian. The third rule began to manifest in unsettling, fleeting glimpses during one tour. As I was explaining the different burial customs of early Savannah, I saw her out of the corner of my eye. A small, translucent figure. A girl in a long, old-fashioned dress, peeking from behind a particularly large, ornate crypt. When I turned my head to look directly, she was gone. Moments later, Kyle Jefferson, who had been lagging slightly behind, caught up, a puzzled frown on his face. "Did you hear that?" he asked, a little girl giggling, and I thought I felt someone tug on my sleeve. But there was no one there. Trina, further ahead, shivered. I thought I saw some children," she said hesitantly, "playing tag, way down at the end of that dark tunnel, but they were so quiet." I started spending my own off hours poring over the dusty, archived maps of the catacombs in the site's small, disorganized office, cross-referencing them with historical records of the 1876 epidemic, trying to pinpoint the 1876 epidemic, trying to pinpoint the exact locations of the unmarked children's burial plots. The official maps were vague, incomplete, but some older hand-drawn sketches hinted at sections far more ancient, far more extensive than the current public routes acknowledged. Areas marked with strange symbols and cautionary notes in faded ink. "Here be sorrows, the little sleepers, do not disturb." One afternoon, before my shift, I found a child's drawing, rendered in faded charcoal on a brittle piece of parchment, tucked into a crevice in the wall near the staff entrance. It depicted crude stick figures. One, noticeably larger than the others, was leading several smaller stick figures by the hand into a dark, tunnel-like opening. One of the smaller figures, significantly more detailed than the others, had the name M. Pato scrawled above it in a childish, uneven hand. Beneath the entire drawing, almost invisible in the dim light, was a newer, more elegant annotation, written in faint pencil. "New friends will be joining the game soon. They always do." The handwriting was delicate, precise, unmistakably Veronica Ames's. A cold dread, sharp and absolute, settled in my stomach. Veronica wasn't just observing history here. She was actively participating in its most horrifying, ongoing chapter. Veronica's annotation on that disturbing drawing confirmed my deepest unvoiced fears. She wasn't a kindred spirit. She was something else, something deeply enmeshed in the catacombs' sinister undercurrents. My academic curiosity had curdled into a gnawing paranoia. The tunnels no longer felt like a repository of history, but a carefully baited, sentient trap. And I was the latest specimen under observation. Sleep became a luxury, my nights filled with dreams of endless, suffocating darkness, the distant echo of children's laughter, and the cold porcelain touch of unseen hands. I confronted Dana Wolf, my voice sharper than intended, brandishing the drawing. Her carefully maintained composure crumbled. Her eyes darted nervously towards the locked door of her inner office, as if expecting something to emerge. "Mr. Colson, Jared, there are things about this place, protocols, agreements," she stammered, wringing her hands. "Mark Patel, he got too close to the whispering games, as he called them. He believed the children were communicating with him. He started interacting, leaving them little gifts. It's not permitted. There are consequences." Her fear was palpable, but beneath it, there was a layer of resignation, of grim, helpless complicity. The inevitable escalation came during another late tour. The Jeffersons, Trina and Kyle, had, against my better judgment, and perhaps their own, returned morbidly fascinated, wanting to understand what Trina had briefly glimpsed. A few other foolhardy tourists joined them. The atmosphere in the catacombs that night was thicker, more charged than ever before. The children were bolder. Their fleeting appearances were more frequent. their whispers more distinct, more inviting. We were in a wider chamber, a place where several tunnels converged, grimly known as Fever Rest, due to the sheer number of unmarked graves from the 1876 epidemic. Suddenly, one of them solidified, stepping directly into the weak beam of my flashlight. A young girl, no more than 7 or 8, in a faded gingham dress. Her blonde hair matted, her eyes dark, hollow sockets that seemed to drink the light. Yet her smile was beatific, innocent, utterly terrifying. She glided towards Trina Jefferson, her small, unnaturally pale hand outstretched. "Play with me," the whisper came, not from her lips, but seemingly from the air all around us, a chorus of childish voices. "Let's play Red Hands." Trina, mesmerized, terrified, yet somehow compelled, slowly extended her own hand. Kyle started to protest, but a sudden gusting wind snuffed out half our battery-powered lanterns, plunging us into deeper shadow. The ghost child's touch, when her icy fingers met Trina's, was clearly visible even in the gloom. They began the game, a chillingly silent pantomime. The only sound the faint, rhythmic slap-slap of their hands. One spectral, one solid. Then the remaining lanterns flickered violently, dimmed and died, plunging us into absolute suffocating blackness. A single sharp scream. Trina's pierced the dark. Then silence. "Trina!" Kyle's voice was a raw, panicked shout. I fumbled with my backup flashlight, its beam finally cutting through the oppressive dark. The chamber was empty, save for our terrified, huddled tour group. Trina Jefferson was gone, vanished, in the inescapable confines of that stone-walled tunnel, with no discernible exits other than the one we stood in. She had simply ceased to exist. Kyle was hysterical, clawing at the walls, screaming her name, and then, stepping calmly from a narrow, unmapped side passage I'd never noticed before. Her expression, one of profound, almost beatific sorrow, was Veronica Ames. She carried a small, antique oil lamp, its gentle glow casting long, dancing shadows. "Oh, my dears," she said, her voice dripping with carefully curated sympathy. "What seems to be the trouble? These old tunnels, they can be so treacherous. Sometimes people simply get lost in the dark. Or perhaps a small sinkhole. The ground here is so unstable." Her composure, in the face of Kyle's raw grief and our collective terror, was too perfect, too rehearsed. As I tried to shepherd the remaining, weeping tourists towards the exit, my flashlight beam shaking so badly I could barely see, I glanced back at the spot where Trina had been standing. Lying on the dusty earthen floor, where nothing had been moments before, was a small, antique porcelain doll. It was identical to the one I had seen earlier, dressed in faded lace, its painted smile chipped. But this one was not missing an eye. And around its delicate china neck, glinting faintly in the weak light, was Trina Jefferson's distinctive silver locket, the one with the intertwined initials she'd been showing off just an hour before. The game had found a new player. Trina Jefferson's silver locket, glinting innocently around the porcelain neck of that soulless doll, was a screeching, undeniable siren in the fog of my denial. This wasn't folklore. This wasn't psychological stress. This was real. The catacombs weren't just haunted. They were a hunting ground, a grotesque playground where the lost children of 1876 claimed new, unwilling playmates. And Veronica Ames, with her sweet smile and historical platitudes, was complicit. Or worse, Kyle Jefferson was a wreck, a man hollowed out by grief and disbelief, his raw sobs echoing in the oppressive silence as I, with Veronica's disturbingly calm assistance, led the remaining terrified tourists back to the surface. Dana Wolf met us at the entrance, her face already pale. but whitening further as the story tumbled out. She wrung her hands, offered incoherent apologies, promised to call the authorities, but her eyes, when they met mine, held a familiar, helpless fear, the look of someone trapped in a nightmare they couldn't escape. I couldn't leave it. Guilt, a corrosive acid, ate at me. Trina had vanished on my tour, Patel, Spectral Song, the Rolling Ball, the Doll. They were all pieces of a puzzle I was now terrifyingly a part of. The third rule, you've become the eternal Playmate coordinator. That wasn't a metaphor for burnout. It was a goddamn job description. And I was failing. While Dana dealt with the hysterical tourists and a bewildered Kyle, and Veronica offered victim support with a predatory solicitude that made my skin crawl, I slipped away, armed with the oldest, most detailed maps of the catacombs I could find in the dusty office archives. Maps that showed twisting, unmapped tendrils of tunnels, spreading far beneath the city like necrotic roots. And my heavy-duty flashlight, I went back down. Alone. The air in the catacombs felt different now. Charged, expectant. The silence was deeper, but the whispers were louder, more insistent, no longer just at the edge of hearing but coalescing into sibilant, childish voices. Play with us, Jared. Don't be afraid. Trina likes the games. I ignored them, focusing on the faded ink of the old map, pushing deeper into sections far off the approved tour routes, sections that smelled of undisturbed earth and something else. Something metallic and sharp, like old fear. The bricked-up entrance to Tunnel C7 pulsed with a cold, angry energy as I passed it. And then I heard it again. Mark Patel's voice, clearer this time, not singing, but speaking. A desperate, fragmented whisper that seemed to bleed from the very stones. She helps them. The historian feeds them. Her brother, he waits. He always waits for new friends. His words, a ghostly breadcrumb trail, led me to a section not marked on even the oldest maps. A narrow fissure, hidden behind a loose section of retaining wall, opened into a larger chamber. The air here was cloying, almost suffocating, with that funereal gardenia scent, but also with the unmistakable sweetish odor of decay. It was a charnel nursery. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of antique toys were arranged in grotesque, playful tableaux. Porcelain dolls, with vacant eyes and cracked smiles, sat propped against crumbling burial niches. Tin soldiers, rusted and bent, stood in perpetual silent battle. A child's rocking horse, its paint faded, one rocker broken, stood frozen mid-rock, and scattered amongst these relics of a bygone era were newer, more disturbing items. A single, modern running shoe, caked in mud. A tourist's discarded digital camera, its lens cracked. Trina Jefferson's brightly colored silk scarf, draped carefully over the shoulders of a particularly large, unsettlingly lifelike doll. And beside each of these newer items, these tokens of the recently vanished, was a small antique doll, each now wearing or holding a miniature, perfectly replicated item belonging to the lost person. A tiny fabric locket, a minuscule camera, charm, a scrap of bright silk. It was a museum of stolen souls. And in the center of this macabre playroom, gently brushing the hair of the doll wearing Trina's scarf, humming a soft, sorrowful lullaby, was Veronica Ames. She looked up as I entered, her expression not of surprise, but of quiet, almost tender welcome. Jared, she said, her voice soft. I wondered when you'd find our special place. Isn't it peaceful? Peaceful. My voice was a strangled rasp. Beside her, another doll, one I hadn't noticed, sat propped against a small, unmarked headstone. It wore a tiny, meticulously crafted replica of Mark Patel's company ID badge. Veronica, what is this? What have you done? Her smile was beatific, touched with an unbearable sadness. My younger brother, Thomas, she began, her gaze drifting to a faded daguerreotype photograph propped against another doll. A solemn-faced boy with her same bright eyes. He died in the fever, you know. The Yellow Jack of 76. He was so lonely. I used to come down here as a girl, after my grandmother first showed me the hidden ways. I could feel him here, faintly. And the others, the hollow children, as you call them, they were lonely too. Her story tumbled out. A disturbing, delusional confession delivered with a chilling, almost childlike sincerity. She hadn't just been researching. She'd been curating. She believed she could communicate with her lost brother through the spirits of the other fever children. She'd started by leaving them his old toys, then small offerings. Then she'd realized they needed more. They needed playmates, living company. She started guiding those she deemed lost or alone. Vagrants, runaways, disoriented tourists who strayed from their groups, deeper into the catacombs, introducing them to the children. Patel had gotten too curious, too close to understand. Trina had been an unexpected gift. The artifacts she'd uncovered were her offerings, a way of strengthening the children's connection to this world. And she believed, to her Thomas, they're not suffering, Jared, she insisted, her eyes shining with a frightening, fervent conviction. They're happy now. They have new friends. Thomas is finally smiling again. And you, Jared, with your understanding of history, your sensitivity, you were meant to help me. To be the new coordinator, to make sure the games never end. As if summoned by her words, the hollow children materialized, not as fleeting glimpses this time, but as pale, translucent, yet horribly solid forms. A dozen of them, dressed in the faded, tattered clothes of the 19th century, their eyes dark, empty sockets, their smiles fixed and mirthless. They surrounded me, their touch like graveyard frost, their childish giggles echoing with an ancient predatory hunger. Play with us, Jared. The chorus was inside my head now. Be our friend, forever. Be our friend, forever. One of them, the girl in the gingham dress who had taken Trina, glided towards me, her small cold hand outstretched. She was humming the tune to London Bridge. They began to circle me, their movements unnervingly fast, their spectral forms flickering the beam of my flashlight. Veronica watched, her face alight with a terrifying maternal pride. Join the game, Jared, she urged softly. Make them happy. It's what Thomas would want. Just as the circle tightened, as the first icy fingers brushed against my skin, a raw, desperate shout echoed from the tunnel entrance. Jared! Trina! Get away from them! Kyle Jefferson. He hadn't left. He'd come back, his face a mask of grief-stricken fury, a heavy, rusted length of old pipe clutched in his hand like a club. He charged into the chamber, a whirlwind of desperate, protective rage. The hollow children, momentarily startled by the sudden violent intrusion, hissed, their forms wavering, their attention briefly diverted from me. It was a sliver of a chance, but a chance nonetheless. Kyle Jefferson's desperate charge was an act of raw, unthinking courage. But against the spectral forms of the hollow children, his rusted pipe was a useless weapon. They flowed around his wild swings like smoke, their childish giggles turning into irritated, sibilant hisses. One of them, a small boy in tattered knickerbockers, darted forward and touched Kyle's arm. He cried out, stumbling back, a bloom of shocking, unnatural frost spreading instantly on his sleeve, his skin beneath turning a ghastly white. No, Kyle, don't fight them, Veronica shrieked, her maternal solicitude for the spirits overriding any concern for the living. You'll only make them angry. They just want to play. But her words, and Kyle's desperate intervention, had bought me a precious few seconds. My mind, reeling from the horror, latched onto Veronica's obsession. Games, the rules, the children's need for playmates. If their existence, their power, was tied to these games, then perhaps the games themselves held the key. When the ghost children start playing with your living tour group and teaching them games, you've become the eternal Playmate coordinator. A coordinator. Someone who organizes, who directs. "What game are we playing now, Veronica?" I shouted, my voice surprisingly steady, cutting through the spectral hisses and Kyle's pained gasps. The hollow children paused, their hollow eyes fixing on me, their movements momentarily stilled by the direct address. Veronica looked momentarily confused. "Why?" "We were about to play London Bridge, Jared. Thomas always loved London Bridge." "No," I said, a wild, desperate idea forming. My historical knowledge, the countless hours spent researching Savannah's past, the 1876 epidemic. That's not the game they truly want. Not tonight. Not after they have a new friend. I gestured towards the doll wearing Trina's locket. They want a game of finding. A game of bringing everyone together. I was improvising, grasping at straws, trying to impose some kind of order, some kind of narrative onto the chaos. "Hide and seek," I declared, my voice echoing a little too loudly in the oppressive chamber. A grand game of hide and seek. All the friends together again. That's what they want, isn't it, Veronica? For all the lonely children to be found? The hollow children stilled, their heads cocking in unison. An unnervingly synchronized movement. A low whisper, like wind through dry leaves, rustled through the chamber. "Hide and seek." Veronica's eyes lit up with a feverish, almost manic understanding. "Yes. Oh yes, Jared. Thomas loved hide and seek. He was so good at hiding." She turned to the spirits, her voice trembling with excitement. "Children, Mr. Colson has a wonderful idea. We'll all play, and we'll find everyone. Even the ones who are very well hidden." Her gaze flickered towards the darker, unexplored tunnels leading from the chamber. It was a terrible gamble, but it was the only one I had. "Kyle," I hissed, grabbing his arm. His skin was shockingly cold where the spirit child had touched him. "We have to play along. We have to be the seekers, but we seek the way out." The hollow children began to disperse, their forms flickering, giggling as they faded into the deeper shadows, into the myriad nooks and crannies of their macabre nursery. "Ready or not, here we come," the chorus whispered, fading into the oppressive silence. "You see, Jared," Veronica said, her face aglow. "They're happy now. You understand them." She moved towards one of the darker tunnel entrances, the one where the air was thickest with that cloying gardenia scent. "Thomas is this way. He's the best hider. We must find him first." This was my chance. While Veronica was distracted, her delusion momentarily sated, Kyle and I had to find an escape. The main tunnels were likely now a spectral playground, but the old maps. I remembered a notation on one. A forgotten service shaft, supposedly sealed, near this undocumented section. "We'll find him, Veronica," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But a good game needs boundaries. We can't have anyone getting too lost." I edged towards the tunnel entrance Veronica wasn't focused on, trying to orient myself with the remembered map. The game had begun, a desperate, terrifying game of hide and seek, where the seekers were also the prey, and the hiders were legion, their laughter echoing from the cold, unyielding earth, promising an eternity of play in the darkness beneath Savannah. The catacombs became a nightmarish playground. Every shadow seemed to hold a giggling spectral child. Every rustle of dust, every drip of water sounded like a footstep. A hushed whisper of "Can't find me, Kyle," his arm throbbing with an unnatural icy pain. stumbled beside me, his initial fury replaced by a grim, terrified determination. Veronica, utterly lost in her delusion, flitted ahead, calling out her brother's name, occasionally pointing to a dark alcove and declaring, "He's close. I can feel him." My gamble so far was holding. By initiating the game, by giving the Hollow children a new, focused activity, their direct aggression had momentarily abated, but the air was still thick with their presence, their cold touch a constant threat, their whispers an insidious erosion of sanity. We were on their turf, playing by their rules, even if I was desperately trying to rewrite them as we went. Using the tattered mental image of the old map, I navigated us through a series of crumbling, forgotten passages, away from Veronica and the main concentration of spirits. We found the old service shaft, its entrance half collapsed, choked with debris. It smelled of stagnant water and something else, something sharp and metallic, like old iron. Iron, I muttered, remembering the folklore, the apotropaic qualities. Could it be a barrier? Working frantically, using a loose heavy stone as a makeshift tool, we managed to clear enough debris to reveal a rusted iron-runged ladder ascending into absolute blackness. This had to be it. Our only way out. "You first, Kyle," I urged. He hesitated, looking back into the gloom from whence we came, where the faint, chilling sound of children singing, ring around the rosy, was now audible. As Kyle started to climb, a cold, small hand suddenly gripped my ankle. I cried out. The gingham-dressed girl, Trina's doppelganger, stood before me, her hollow eyes fixed on mine, her other hand holding the doll with Trina's locket. "Lee, don't go, coordinator," the chorus whispered in my head. "The game isn't over. We haven't found everyone." Behind her, Veronica, her face contorted in a mask of betrayal and sorrow. "You're leaving, but Thomas, we haven't found Thomas. We haven't found Thomas." The other Hollow children were materializing, their forms more solid, their giggles turning into frustrated, angry hisses. The game was breaking down. "Veronica," I said, my voice desperate, "Thomas isn't here to be found by you like this. He's gone. These are just echoes. Trapped. And you're trapping more." I looked at the doll in the gingham girl's hand. "Trina. Is Trina in there?" The ghost child tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "She's playing. Always playing." There was no reasoning with them, no reasoning with Veronica. I wrenched my ankle free, the cold touch leaving my skin burning and numb. I shoved the doll, Trina's doll, into Veronica's hands. "Here, a new playmate for Thomas. Here, a new playmate for Thomas. The game is to keep this one safe. Protect her. That's the most important rule now." Veronica stared at the doll, her expression shifting from anger to a dawning, confused tenderness. She clutched it to her chest. The Hollow children hesitated, their attention drawn to the doll, to Veronica's sudden, focused devotion. It was the only distraction I'd get. "Kyle, go!" I scrambled up the ladder after him, into the unknown darkness, the sounds of Veronica crooning to the doll, and the confused, frustrated whispers of the Hollow children fading below. We emerged, filthy and shaking, into a forgotten, boarded-up cellar, beneath an abandoned warehouse, on the edge of the historic district, miles from the Oglethorpe Catacombs main entrance. We were out. Veronica Amos was found a few days later, deep within the catacombs, catatonic, clutching a porcelain doll, humming a child's lullaby. She was committed. The hidden nursery chamber was eventually located, though its full extent and the true number of artifacts were never officially disclosed. The deepest, oldest sections of the Oglethorpe catacombs were permanently sealed by the city, citing extreme geological instability. Trina Jefferson was never found. Her official status remains a missing person. I left Savannah. I never went back. I tried to live a normal life, but the quiet sweetness of gardenias now makes my stomach churn. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone and the house is quiet, I'll hear it. Faint, distant, almost imaginary. A child's giggle and the gentle, unmistakable sound of a small glass marble rolling slowly across a dusty wooden floor, coming to a stop just outside my bedroom door. The games, I know, are never truly over, and somewhere, in the darkness, new playmates are always being sought by the eternal children.